The problem with ninth gen consoles. More than ever, I'm hearing a lot of dissatisfaction with the current generation of consoles. When the Xbox Series X and PS5 launched back in 2020, it was to literally unparalleled anticipation. We were promised faster loading times, better graphics, and a new wave of next gen experiences that will blow our minds, same as every other generation before. But the more I hear people talk about it, the clearer it becomes that this might be the most divisive generation ever. Back in 2020, thanks in no small part to the fact that everyone was stuck inside and had absolutely nothing to do with their time, people were watching more TV, listening to more music, and of course, playing more games. Unfortunately, when the next gen consoles launched, this caused something of a supply chain issue. What happens when you have 10 times greater demand than supply? That's right, a serious supply chain issue. But what happens when you have 100 times greater demand than supply? That's right, a literal riot. Getting your hands on a PS5 or Series X in the first couple of years was a nightmare. Between chip shortages caused by the pandemic, bots snapping up every restock, and all the physical shops being closed, most people had to rely on pure luck or pay completely ridiculous scalper prices. It also didn't help that because of the pandemic, there was also a global shortage of semiconductors, which lowered production capacity. So essentially, you had greater than usual demand and lower than usual production capacity. A bit of a recipe for disaster. By the time the pandemic was coming to an end and the stock had improved, the early excitement had kind of faded away and most people had already moved on or just stuck with their old console, causing a massive surge in the PC gaming population and creating yet another massive supply chain and availability issue, this time with GPUs, but that's a whole other story for another day. Nobody being able to get consoles caused yet another problem. With any other generation, there was a clean break from the previous console. The minute the Xbox 360 was released, there was nothing new coming for the original Xbox because the older hardware was no longer able to keep up with the ever increasing demand of modern games. But since unusually few people had actually managed to get their hands on next gen console, games had to be made to run on both current and last gen consoles. What should have been massive, groundbreaking next gen flagship titles like Horizon Forbidden West, God of War Ragnarok, and Halo Infinite were also released on previous gen consoles, and so felt a lot smaller than they should have. There really was no right thing for studios to do in this situation, which is better, leaving behind a massive portion of your player base that hadn't managed to get access to a newer console but allowing developers to create the game they wanted to, or satisfying both sections of your player base but forcing developers to cut back on their vision. This leads nicely on to what I think is by far the biggest complaint that I've heard about modern gaming: the aggressive monetization. Even though production costs and development times are rising to astronomical levels, it feels like fewer and fewer games are actually launching in an acceptable state. How often do you hear, oh, this game sucks now, but it'll be good in a year? It's almost an expectation now for a game to launch in a complete state and only be improved over time. But what's paying for these absolutely monumental development costs? That's right, microtransactions. Microtransactions started off as small cosmetic purchases, mainly in multiplayer games, and seemed to not really bother anyone, but over time they've slowly but surely crept into every aspect of modern gaming, to the point where a game will actually often sell itself on not having microtransactions. And certain bottom of the barrel strategies like pay to win that were previously contained in the steaming cesspit that is the mobile gaming market are beginning to make their way into the PC and console games like COD, Star Citizen, Warframe, and many others. And since games take so much longer to develop and cost so much more than they used to, games really are just released further apart than they were before. And so the immense power of these new consoles is rarely fully utilized like it would have been in previous generations. It sometimes feels like the games of today are more evolutionary than revolutionary. Impressive as a game like Starfield is, and much as I enjoyed some aspects of that game, like the world building, art style, and some of the gameplay, it doesn't really give you that feeling of wow, this really does feel like something new and impressive that could only be done with the power of a next gen console. It felt very much on the same technical level as Skyrim or Fallout 4, and those games both released more than a decade ago. Storage is also just an absolute joke now. I would say the average size for a AAA game in 2025 is around 30 to 50 gigabytes, sometimes even more, and consoles usually have in or around a terabyte. Unless you're the Series S, a console that expects you to somehow survive with just half a terabyte. If you want all the games that everyone is playing, like COD, Halo Infinite, and the Master Chief Collection, Battlefield, GTA, Red Dead, plus whatever else you want, that's already 500 gigabytes minimum. Or you could splash out $100 for an official Seagate SSD that only gives you space for one or two more games. So, in conclusion, the PS5 and Series X are absolute powerhouses, but between the lack of good games, storage headaches, and the fact that you couldn't get one for under a grand for a few years, this generation has been something of a mixed bag, to say the least. Before I go, I'd like to remind everyone that I have a Twitter page now, so go and follow me over there if you haven't already. And since the channel really is picking up steam now, a sub would be greatly appreciated. Other than that, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all soon.